Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 79, with the one and only Eric Stoller. So it's been a long time since I have spoken with him, so it's really great to catch up and hear all about what's been going on for Eric since he came back stateside from living in the UK for 5 years. And since he also took a role with GeckoEngage as their VP of Digital Strategy, working with them to be advocating for the use of chatbots in higher education, which is really cool stuff. But it's always great talking with Eric. Just always appreciate everything that he shares about his journey and things that he's learned and what he's working on. Just always a good time talking with him. So check out a couple of things that we mentioned in this episode down in the show notes as usual. Make sure to connect with Eric and GeckoEngage, and just sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode number 79 with Eric Stoller. I do remember talking to you a long time ago. It's like stuck in my mind more so on my end because it was like one of the rare sort of like acts of a higher power when recorded. So I'm not sure if you remember this, where like my file just got corrupted and I like had to sort of like humbly ask you to record again, which you graciously did again. You recorded again, and it was great because it was such a great episode. I really wanted to make sure that we did it. So I always remember that as one of these rare times where it just like completely lost an episode, but was still able to salvage it by just like recording again. And I always appreciated that you were willing to do a redo on that. And I'm really excited to talk to you again after many years and a lot of change that's happened for you and myself. But so we'll get into all that. But thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, no, thanks, Dustin. Thanks for letting me come back, and I guess I should have scripted all of my remarks so that just in case the episode goes down again, I could just repeat everything and we could just stick it in there.
Right.
But yeah, no, I really appreciate the chance to have a chat and come on the show. You're getting what in like 70 some episodes now, so you've got quite the run going.
I do. It's been a fun ride, and I guess we'll see if like is this cursed or we never meant to record or something if this happened again. But hopefully
exactly.
not. Everything looks good. But So we will start just giving an introduction of yourself. So if you want to just tell people who you are and kind of a short version of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, well, because no one wants to hear like the full bio. So, what I'm doing right now is I'm the VP of Digital Strategy for a higher ed chatbots company called GeckoEngage. And I've been working there now since September of 2019. But I've always been a student affairs person. I have my graduate degrees in higher ed admin. I've worked in academic advising, student services, sort of the marketing and comm side of things, as well as health promotion and wellness, and had a 9-year run prior to my new job as a digital engagement consultant, and I was also the student affairs and technology blog for that 9-year period. So I've kind of been really busy, and I've also lived in a different country for 5 years, from 2014 to 2019. So I lived in the UK, and so I was doing consulting over there as well. So I've got maybe I'll throw in some British words in the podcast.
Right, some slang. I'll just confuse people. But I think your journey is very unique. So it'll be cool to explore it a little bit. But what is always interesting to me is like talking with people, kind of thinking back to their own like kind of origin stories. Primarily kind of like higher ed focused on this show. So whether people work within the field or not, it's always cool hearing their own college stories, things that are still resonating with them today in their life, whether it's personal or professional, mentors, friends, any of those sort of things, or just sort of like life lessons. What kind of comes to mind in terms of like, what do you feel like your own college experience gave to you that's still resonating today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think whenever I'm asked this type of question, I always think back to my grandfather, who never even graduated from high school, who, as far as I can remember when I was a little kid, would tell me, stay in school as long as possible. If they will let you stay in school, stay in there and learn as much as possible as you can. And I always kind of took that advice to heart. And so, in my career, I've sort of, I went to college and loved it, and then kind of, found my way back into higher ed and never really left. And I think that, personally, I grew up in sort of small town, rural Iowa, and I always thought that, higher ed, because I went to community college first, and then I went on to a university, and, it kind of gave me this window into a sense of, I guess, unexplored potential. sort of showing me, things that I didn't know before, and pushing me to think about things in ways I hadn't before. And I think that, it's still very much part of, kind of who I am as an ethos. And I think, but professionally, I mean, just from some of the things that I took away from, I was a jazz trombonist in a community college, and I had, solos on the stage. And then I went on to be, kind of someone who does a lot of public speaking. And I think that there's a lot of, sort of, in terms of what it takes to be on a stage, and sort of getting over nerves and, feeling anxiety or whatnot with that, to just simple things like when I was a student at University of Northern Iowa, learning graphic design and website design, and becoming a better writer throughout that whole time. And those are things that they still serve me well to this day.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, what's interesting with what you're saying, like, I'd imagine you're going in to post-secondary education at, through community college, bachelor, 4-year, and then master's after that, just like wanting to, that value of what you said, like from, your grandparent, like that, kind of just like take as much from it as you can, versus like, I think a lot of people can, students who, it's kind of a transactional thing. It's just like, get me out of here as quickly as possible. And there's certainly some value to that. But, the worry would be that you are just really kind of checking the boxes and just trying to kind of rubber stamp your way to their credential. And then you go on and it's like, well, you kind of really missed out on like, all these like sort of extracurricular things, or just like other things that you could do that would be really meaningful and be really valuable throughout your entire life. So I think it's just, a cool thing, like a cool value that was so, like, it was a simple little like kind of germ that was like put in, that it seems like it really bore out some really valuable things for you. So that's really cool.
Well, definitely. And you mentioned my master's degree, and I always thought, when I had my undergrad, and when I had my first student affairs job, my entry-level student affairs job, prior to having a master's degree. And at one point, when I was at the University of Illinois at Chicago, someone asked me, "So where did you go for grad school?" And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I have my undergrad degree. I'm good to go, right. Set for life in my head. And so I sort of came to higher ed student affairs grad program, sort of later in many ways, I think. And so, that definitely sort of changed my perspective. And I was always the one who was maybe a bit more interested in how technology impacted the student experience. At the time, I wouldn't have sort of voiced it that way, but that's kind of been at the heart of just sort of me and what I've enjoyed doing.
Yeah. Well, that segues beautifully to my next question, in terms of like your current work is still sort of, in that space of kind of those intersections of technology, digital engagement, and student experience. So you obviously made kind of a big change, going from kind of working independently to joining a team to work in definitely a unique aspect of kind of like chatbots and that kind of digital engagement stuff within higher ed. So, just talk a little bit about what you're enjoying, about your current work, maybe what drew you to it originally, and now that you've been doing it for, a handful of months, just what you've been enjoying that's keeping you engaged as, you kind of get deeper into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ironic that I end up working for a company named GeckoEngage, with engage in the name of the company. Right. I mean, kind of one of the ironic aspects of it was that I sort of got to interview them before, they even knew I was interested in potentially working with them, because right before I mentioned we lived in the UK. And right before my family and we moved from the UK, I kind of put out a call and said, "Hey, is anyone interested in a speaker for one of your conferences or events, et cetera, et cetera?" And Gecko asked me to come out, speak at their client forum, where they just so happened to be releasing their sort of new amazing chatbot. And so I got to see it firsthand while sitting next to all their clients from like UK universities, and sort of hearing what they had to say about the company, and meeting all the programmers and all the, just the entire team. And I didn't really know it at the time, but that was the moment where I was really sort of getting to know them and get to sort of know the technology. And it was really impressive. I mean, I had been on this 9-year run as a consultant where I thought, this is my favorite job. I made up this job. It's my job, tailored to me. Mm-hmm. And then when we moved back to the US, I started thinking, you know what? I've been doing the social media digital engagement thing specifically for 9 years, and before that kind of part-time. And this whole chatbot thing really was intriguing to me in terms of how artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, how it all kind of came together to provide the same kind of stuff I've been talking about in terms of, enhanced ways to support students in terms of resources and information 24/7, 365 through various apps and platforms. And I thought, this to me feels like the next evolution for student engagement. So I'm just going to say to them, hey, what if I work for you? And that was kind of the genesis of it all. I kind of pitched them on my idea of a position, and essentially I'm very fortunate. I get to do for GeckoEngage what I was doing prior to that, which is sort of speaking at events, providing thought leadership through blog posts and other channels, and working with higher ed leaders to sort of get them to understand the value of sort of the next stage of technology, which feels very similar to how it used to be when I sort of go in and talk about social media back in the early days.
Yeah. So now, it's like even that, like the skills that you kind of built with that now are still serving you well, which is, it's really great. Because definitely, I mean, I guess as with anything, you kind of just have to like even norm the idea of, because I'm sure people are just kind of skeptical, especially, within higher ed with, just because, again, it is a unique value, but like long-standing traditions may be slower to move or adapt, but, obviously increasingly being influenced by technology. But I think it's hopefully, I guess, I don't know if you want to speak to this maybe really briefly, but like, hopefully it's like an easier sell, because I think it's like, in my head, people are probably somewhat familiar with this because like basically any website you go to nowadays is going to have some sort of like chat feature that's just like natively, down in like the bottom right-hand corner, and you can kind of engage to sort of, maybe get your question answered by that, or at least like funnel you in the right way to get, the best help that you need from the best person, So I guess, what does that feel like now? Does it feel like super similar, or do you feel like it's maybe like easier or harder, I guess, in terms of sort of like just norming the idea of these sort of things that are sort of implicit with, like chatbots, AI, machine learning, like those sort of things?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it reminds me of the fact that, higher ed still has fax machines located kind of all over the place. And so I think sort of like, how do you get to a place where people can sort of adopt new technologies in without sort of feeling threatened by them? And I think in the case of chatbots, the question always comes up. Are we going to lose our jobs because of this? Because, the bot's going to sort of replace people. And the thing is, technology doesn't replace people in this context. It just means that people, in their job descriptions and roles will evolve and adapt over time to include these new technologies, because the bots are only as good as we make them. I think that the beauty of today's modern chatbot is the complexity and sophistication behind the scenes can provide a very sort of simple, intuitive interface for a user, which back in the day when they first came out, it was pretty bad. Let's be honest. Right. And now it's, you've got students who are coming in at 2 a.m. on a Saturday and asking questions to a bot, kind of having this conversation back and forth, and 5-6 minutes on average for a lot of these conversations, and they're going away saying, yeah, that actually answered all my questions, and they can do that at scale. I mean, we had one of our clients, they had something like 3,700 conversations with their bot, and it was specifically located on a recruitment side of things on their website. And something like over 100 unique conversations a day, and you think about what it's handling in terms of, you're never going to have enough people to handle that kind of volume. And then it's also informing what the people are doing, right? So if there's themes that emerge and questions that are asked over and over again, that can really sort of guide and drive everything from what's on your website as a whole, to how you're engaging on social media, to how you're giving presentations at orientation. And I think that's where the data side of things is something maybe we don't talk about enough, but it's kind of like almost the secret sauce of chatbots these days, is sort of the data that it's collecting that you can then use to make things even better.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really awesome. Yeah, I mean, because it could be like, okay, this, like, they're asking questions about something, like it's on the website, but it just seems to not be super clear. So it could be like clarifying it more, or it's just like you said, like, okay, we need to have a session during orientation. Like, this needs to be an active discussion so that we can kind of make sure that things are answered and allow for question, like, because it's like, well, it's already on there. There's like a lot of information. We really can't add any more. It may, make the site too cluttered or something, like it. So yeah, it's like, it can inform however you feel, though, however you feel that it could be best resolved or something. But yeah, like otherwise you would not have that sort of really tangible, really visceral kind of feedback of like, okay, you said like hundreds of people, like, unique people, separate, like they are all uniquely asking like the same question or something. So we need to, make some sort of adjustment here. So,
oh, exactly. It's like that XKCD comic where basically it's like it's a Venn diagram and it shows sort of like things that people want from a university website. And then there's another circle where it's like the university website and trying to sort of combine the two in the middle in terms of what people actually need and want. And I think the other thing about this, of course, is it's super mobile friendly. I mean, if you're sort of constantly thinking that, the experience as a professional, as a staffer at a desk with a monitor is the same as that of a student who's out on the go, you're kidding yourself. I mean, I think look at students they're on mobile devices or they're on their laptop, and we haven't even scratched the surface in talking about how AI, machine learning, all the tech that's connected to this behind the scenes is just perfectly poised to support online learners. Because let's face it, student affairs, you talk about sort of tradition and origins of the profession. Really, that was kind of what I think you implied. There hasn't been a lot of attention given to students who never set foot on campus. And I think that's where, again, the technology enables the enhancement of student support without really, it's not like you're getting rid of buildings or you're trying to sort of say, hey, guess what? This is an addition to our toolkit in the ways in which we're going to support students now in 2020. And guess what? In 2025, if there's something new and better, that's kind of how it goes, because it's not like technology sort of stands still. And I think that to me is sort of the beauty of it, right? Because no day is ever the same when you work in a ed tech company.
Yes, I agree. Because for me too, I'm working in the space of digital education, and it's always trying to, I guess in the roles that I've had, working with institutions versus like, there's a lot of digital education companies out there that are just companies, doing boot camps or something, not associated with any universities at all, which are also fine. But working with institutions, it's trying, obviously, like you're working with this, venerable brand. It has like great awareness and has all these great things, but then also it's sort of the downside of like, well, we have to like really build the capacity to support online learners and utilize these sort of tools to do that. And yeah, right now, I think it is definitely a moment where dynamic, chat features and things like in an LMS, learning management system, like Canvas or something on a recruitment website, like there's now really great platforms that can do that. And I think that's certainly a trend that I think we'll see kind of rippling out quite a bit, and kind of both those ways, like in a lot of different kind of ways, whether it's students who are actually in the program or students who are wanting to get into the program. Definitely a lot of good value there. So I guess now I'm thinking, everything that you've said, there's obviously so much happening in higher ed all the time, and maybe now kind of like joining a team, joining a company, like working in a different way, anything like that. Like, what are you geeking out about right now? I don't know if it's like, stuff that helps you to like relax, to be able to kind of process and just sort of like, buoy yourself through all of this kind of like, the stuff that's going on, or stuff professionally that you're kind of connecting with to help, your work every day. So however you want to take it, personal and or professional, what are you geeking out about right now?
That's quite the question. I mean, I was just thinking about the fact that when I pitched this role to Matt Lanham, the CEO of Gecko, I said, I'm kind of coming in from the desert. I've been out on my own for 9 years. I've been my own boss. I've been my own company in that sense. And I can't recall what it was like to work with a team. And it was kind of frightening in many ways. And I was thinking, I hope I'm not too feral to reintegrate with colleagues and with professionals. And I think one of the things I've been geeking out about is that, time and time again, if it's through like our countless Slack channels that we have behind the scenes with the company, that I made the right choice, because my colleagues are just, and they're going to probably hear this, but I really think they are just wonderful, beautiful people. And that's a bit gushy and a bit American maybe for my Scottish colleagues. But I think that, that's one of the things that, again, when I, met the company initially, it just felt right. And I think that's probably one of the things I've been geeking out sort of professionally. I think personally, so we have a toddler, and I think that one of the things that I've been geeking out about, and will almost always continue probably to geek out about is the ways in which he learns new things. Mm-hmm. And how, he'll go to bed, he'll wake up the next day, and he'll just start talking about something from 3 weeks ago, and it's articulate, and it has context, and I'm just fascinated by how the human mind works in that way. And I think that kind of goes just kind of in hand with the fact that I've always been fascinated with the ways in which people learn new things and how they kind of get to a place where they want to learn new stuff. And so that's really something I tend to geek out on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I'm very excited to embark on as well. It's just like seeing. Like,
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you there. Yeah. So as of the recording of this, still a couple of months away from first child with my wife, but just like sort of knowing, like my brother has, so my niece is 2 years old, so like he's been sort of remarking a lot about similar things, and it's just child development kind of thing. I'm sure it's just going to be such a wild ride, and I think. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously like one very unique personal aspect. And then that idea of like just, working with other people in a professional capacity. And I guess also, I mean, working remotely, which I guess you have a little bit more familiarity with, but, certainly for some people would also be pretty unique. But so I guess with those kind of things, maybe, I don't know if there's anything, with either of those sort of geeking out topics or otherwise, just like, that you're reading, watching, listening to that are like kind of augmenting your personal and or professional life, but anything that you would like to recommend we can put in the show notes.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny to say that because I was trying to, think about, because you sent me some questions ahead of time. I was trying to think, what is it that, I've been reading, watching, and listening to that would actually be valuable for people. And I think, this job that I've made for myself with Gecko is pretty full on. And so, it's one of my favorite things to do is kind of unplug. And I think, as much as we've been talking about technology in this podcast, I also feel like there's the running theme of like connecting with people and kind of, being away from technology. And so I think that, one of the things we have been watching, though, I will say, is that we've been watching a lot of Succession, which is interesting. I love the opening piano, the tune to that. And I think the plot is both like disturbing and highly entertaining. Because in a way, we were living in the UK for 5 years, and I felt like we were sort of disconnected from sort of like pop culture in America. And I think that's where, it's been interesting to come back and just plug in, pop open Netflix and, see what's on. Because the Netflix you see in the UK is different than the Netflix you see in the States. And I'm still watching, like BBC stuff as much as possible because, I definitely have like Killing Eve is a wonderful show as well. And I think I can't wait for the next season for that to drop. But in terms of like listening, it's funny. I am on a lot of podcasts, but I rarely have time to listen to them because I don't have a drive. I don't have a drive or like a commute or, I wake up in the morning and I make coffee and I make breakfast for, my son. And it's like, and then I roll up into my office, I'm like right here. And it's like straight into work. And so, I'll listen to a lot of YouTube videos kind of in the background. But again, it's mostly just music, and so random pop, rock, grime. I love Stormzy. I mean, living in the UK, I would see sort of posters for Stormzy. He's a grime artist, and just a huge name in the UK and beyond. And I definitely really enjoy listening to his stuff.
Very cool. Yeah, I'll have to link out to that. But yeah, I feel like with anything, I guess, like if you're kind of like consuming content, it's like as much about the habit of it as it is just like, finding stuff you like or whatever. Cause I think for me, it's so hard for me to like get into a good habit with reading books. Like I read a lot in terms of just like online articles and stuff like that. But like sitting down with the book has always just been the hardest thing, after like getting through school and stuff to be really diligent with. But like, yeah, like podcasts are the soundtrack of my, like, even though I'm working remotely, just like putzing around the apartment, like doing dishes, laundry, like this or that, the other thing.
Oh,
so
amazing.
Like I've just like gotten, just loving the medium and being immersed in it. Like I've just made that habit. And also like with movies and TV, like I'm always just like, okay, I got to work on this show. I got to like knock out a couple episodes, I got to like do that. But then like music, I'm just completely like out of the loop with music. pretty bad with like keeping up with books. I feel like that's kind of what I've observed. It's just like it's much about the habit. If it's just like whatever you naturally gravitate towards, obviously like that's just the higher levels of geekdom.
Yeah. Well, I curate some pretty good playlists on Spotify for a 2-year-old. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like music just being you're a little more naturally inclined to.
Oh, and I should say, one thing I geek out to quite a bit is the fact that I can get Pandora. I always loved Pandora for music just because I always felt they were really good at discovery for new stuff. And not that Spotify isn't, but I'd kind of been wedded to Pandora before moving to the UK, and they're not actually available in the UK.
Wow.
So that was like something I was always like, what? You're not there? And so now it's really nice to have that.
Wow, it's interesting things, that I wouldn't have known. I guess like especially like living in America for a very long time and then being in the UK for several years, like there's a lot of those like little details where it's just like, well, couldn't do this, but I could do this, but I can't do that. And, it's interesting. Let's see. Well, I guess then, we can kind of wrap up on the optimistic note that I love of just anything that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world. So any one or all of those kind of categories.
I wrote notes for all three because I thought this is like an amazing question. I thought, well, I'll start with the job because I'll get that one out of the way, I guess, in the sense that, I think for me, the thing I'm looking forward to the most is just sort of getting to see how our chatbots are really providing students with this around the clock support. I mean, and just digging into those stats and metrics. And every time we pull out a stat that is just sort of this, oh my goodness, that is amazing. And then you think back to the impact it's having, that's just a really cool and fulfilling aspect of the role. I think from a life perspective, a simple thing, just like going for a run around the park with my family. It's literally just us, no distractions. And that's a moment that I really sort of cherish every day that we get the opportunity to do it. And I think maybe because, I lived in a country, the UK, that had a national health service, that kind of informed my next answer for the world. I think I sort of look forward to a day where we don't have to push for things like healthcare and education on a global scale for everyone.
That'll be a bright day in our future. Because I think, it's just interesting so much now. Like, it's at least sort of more normed in kind of like American political conversation to at least be like figuring out like, well, how would we do that? How would we like really provide a more kind of full-hearted investment into, higher education and, just like medical coverage and those sort of things. So there's obviously like a lot of options of how to do it and sort of how to maybe like phase it in or something. But then like, I guess it's just interesting, I guess the difference too of like realizing more and more how like America is sort of, or at least maybe in this current moment, but also quite a bit historically, like driven by states. Like as much as the federal government like tries to do things, like we're seeing a lot of like interesting, developments in terms of like, free college or whatever, like in various state systems. So,
oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's kind of what always reassures me because I'm kind of like, oh man, how is it going to happen if it happens, or those sort of things. But states are figuring it out, and hopefully, they kind of get some momentum going for something more broadly.
Exactly.
Yes, good stuff. So, that is all great stuff. We'll have ways to connect with you and GeckoEngage and everything that we mentioned down in the show notes as usual. But thank you so much for taking the time. It's good to talk with you again. And thanks so much, for reaching out to Connect to do this. So it was a really, really good conversation.
It was awesome. Thanks a lot, Dustin.
This podcast is part of the ConnectEDU Podcast Network, bringing together diverse voices in the higher ed community. Check us out on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod or at connectedu.network. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast.